Grand Theft Auto, Gran Turismo, even God of War. These games are legendary, not just because they're memorable, but these games also can unite the millions of the gamers from all around the world. With one big console that I want to talk about is the PlayStation. Did you know that the PlayStation will never exist if one big thing doesn't happen? The betrayal from the one big company that used to create the games too. And the company name is Nintendo. But how is it even possible that Sony used to work with Nintendo until Sony creating the one big console that changed the impact of the gaming industry? In this video, I'm going to talk about the history of PlayStation. My name is Luthfi Adriyan, and this is Saturday Stories. It all begins in 1988, where Sony engineer Ken Kutaragi, this guy, creating the audio chip that powered Super Nintendo, and it is called SPC 700. And Nintendo very liked that audio chip, and thanks to that audio chip SPC 700, Sony started to interest to entering the gaming industry. Instead to make a standalone console project to compete, Sony chose to work with Nintendo, where Sony can bring their innovation technology, while Nintendo can bring their games creativity and legacy. And their joint project, firstly, is a CD-ROM peripheral for Super Nintendo, and secondly, the hybrid console that can run both cartridges and CDs. In 1991, Sony proudly revealed the Nintendo PlayStation as their joint project with Nintendo at Consumer Electronics Show. Many people are excited and hundreds of prototypes were created. But at the very next day, shocking twist happened. Nintendo said that they will work with Philips instead of Sony. Sony felt betrayed, the project scrapped, and most of the consoles were destroyed. But only one console was saved and then later sold at the auction. After the betrayal, Ken Kutaragi wanted to make the PlayStation as a standalone console. The PlayStation itself can play the 3D games with 64-bit gaming experience. But some people like Sega were locked and mocked at Sony. But Sony didn't give up and proved them wrong. Sony established a new team called Sony Computer Entertainment, where they worked on the PlayStation project together. And Ken Kutaragi were appointed as the CEO of that division. In December 1994, Sony released the PlayStation in Japan, and it sold for 100,000 units in one day. This makes the PlayStation got well accepted in Japan. But what about in North America? Sony plans to release their PlayStation on September 1995, the same time as Sega plans to release their console. At E3 1995, Sega is first to show their console, which is called the Sega Saturn, for $399, released at the same day as they announced their console at E3. And then Sony came on stage and just said one word only, $299. And people were shocked because the PlayStation was cheaper and powerful. In 48 hours, 100,000 units were sold in the US, followed by 150,000 units were sold in Europe for the first month. And this makes the PlayStation got well accepted in the United States, even globally. The PlayStation have popular games such as Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo, Tomb Raider, and even Crash Bandicoot. The PlayStation was sold over 100 million units in total, makes the PlayStation got a huge success, and it became the big name around the world. What's up with Nintendo after Sony released the PlayStation? Well, actually, Nintendo still continued their CD-ROM project, from partnering with Philips to, well, let's just say that they did release something. But that's the story for another episode. So stay tuned. After the PS1 success, Sony doubled down and then creating the next generation console called PlayStation 2, which is faster and had a better graphics. PlayStation 2 released in March 2000 in Japan and October 2000 in the US for $299, where the PS2 is almost 1 million units were sold just in 2 days. The PlayStation 2 itself could play the DVD movies because at that time, DVD players were so expensive. So people bought the PS2 not just to play the games but also watch movies. The PS2 could also play PS1 games because of the features called the backward compatibility. Some of the most famous games such as God of War, Gran Turismo 4, Kingdom Hearts, and even Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which is the best-selling game that represents the PlayStation 2. So far, PlayStation 2 has sold over 155 million units worldwide, and until today, it is still the best-selling game console of all time. After the PlayStation 2 got huge success, Sony made a new console, the PlayStation 3, which is released in 2006. The PlayStation 3 itself had a very strong hardware and many features such as Blu-ray drive for movies and the big games, the Full HD graphics 1080p, and you can play the games online with a Wi-Fi. At the launch, the PlayStation 3 was very expensive for just $599 just for 60GB storage. Many people thought it was too much money, and this will make you must get a second job just for buy this model of PS3. The PS3 used a special chip called Cell Processor. The chip was very strong, but it's hard to use for developers. Many early PS3 games were not good as the Xbox 360 games. Because of that problem, the PS3 didn't sell well at first, but in 2009, Sony released the slim type of the PS3, which is smaller, cheaper, and developer-friendly for just $299. And the sales start to going up again. Sony learned from their mistakes, and the PS3 Slim has helped them a lot. The PS3 still had many amazing games, such as Uncharted series, The Last of Us, God of War 3, Gran Turismo 5, and even Grand Theft Auto 5, which is the best-selling game that represents PlayStation 3. In total, the PS3 sold about 87 million units. It finally caught up with Xbox 360 after many years. It had a rough beginning, but PS3 didn't give up. Fun fact, this model of PS3 were used as supercomputers by the US military. This because how complex this model specification is. After the PS3, which is the powerful but difficult, Sony changed their approach. So they made the new console simpler, faster, and easier to use. And then Sony launched the PlayStation 4 in 2013 with only $399, which is cheaper than the PS3 at the day it launched, even $100 cheaper than the Xbox One. The PlayStation 4 used a custom chip provided by AMD, which is a core processor, the powerful graphics, and 8GB of RAM, which is the fast memory at that time. And this makes the game developers love it because it's easy to make the games. Fast and smooth performance, the big storage, easy to use, even the support to use and share games is the reason why the people loved the PS4 at that time. Oh, I just mentioned that the PS4 can play and support the share and the use games. Here's a story about that. At the same time, Microsoft released the Xbox One, but it needed to be always online, and you couldn't share or resell the physical games. But Sony reacted fast and gave the games the freedom they wanted. You don't need to always online, even you can play the share and the use games. And Sony also made the video about how to share the PS4 games.
This is how you share your games on PS4. Thanks.
And this makes the gamers very love the PS4 than the Xbox One. The PS4 exclusive games are amazing, such as Marvel Spider-Man, God of War 2018, Uncharted 4, The Last of Us Part 2, Horizon Zero Dawn, and even Ghost of Tsushima. They weren't just fun, but they were memorable. The PS4 didn't just recover, but it became a legend. 1 million units were sold in 24 hours, and over 117 million units in total worldwide. Seven years after the launch of PS4, Sony released the PlayStation 5 in November 2020. The PS5 released in two models, standard with disc and a digital only. The design is very tall, wide, and futuristic, and makes some people thought it looked cool. Like the PlayStation 4, AMD powers the PS5 build. The 8-core processor, the RDNA 2 GPU, and 825GB of SSD. This makes the PS5 loading is super fast, even almost no waiting. The PS5 bringing back the backward compatibility features, where you can play almost 99% of the PlayStation 4 games. The PS5 is very hard to buy at the launching day, scalpers use the bots to buy up all the stock and resell it at the crazy prices. This makes the fans had to wait for months. If you see it on the box, Sony claims that PS5 supports a 4K 120 FPS, but in reality, the most games cannot do both. You must choose 4K but at lower FPS or 120 FPS but at lower resolution. In a few moments later, Sony split the PlayStation Plus into 3 different tiers. Some features were locked behind the paywalls. Even you must pay for cloud saving and online multiplayer. And then Sony introduced the PS Portal, which should be the next PSP for just $200. But in reality, the PS Portal only streams the games from PS5 on the same network. Even you cannot get outside of your home. And if you think that these 3 controversies is enough to divide the PS5, let me show you another. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to Concord, which is the first party game from Firewalk Studios under the PlayStation Studios. It looked like a hero shooter, not a story game, for just $40 only. And the Concord itself is not exclusive because they also release on PC, and fans say that the game feels generic and low interest. And the game lasted for about 2 weeks. Despite of these controversies, the PS5 had also the good games like Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, God of War Ragnarok, even Final Fantasy 16. Many feels that the magic of single-player exclusive games is fading, less hard, and more remakes. As of May 2025, almost 78 million units were sold in total. The PS5 is fast, strong, and sharp. But the one big question is, can it bring back the soul that make PlayStation look special? Thanks for tuning in this video, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And you can add more information and give some correction in comment section. In another episode, I'm going to talk the evolution of PlayStation controller and the history of Nintendo. Stick around because new episodes will be broadcasted every Saturday. And I love to have you with me. And see you on the next episode next Saturday on Saturday Stories. And in the end, I'm Luthfi. As always, have a great day and see ya.